So I thought I'd just do a quick video just to give a final kind of summing up overview of what I've found with the Moonlight camera that Caddx has sent me. It's effectively a V2 dual VTX with a 4K DVR board sandwiched on top within an aluminium case. It's about 35 by 35 by 16 in size, with a MIPI out the front that goes to a 19 by 19 camera that has a 4K Starlight sensor. It's a Moonlight camera. It's not a night camera, so it's not going to perform as well as the Pro camera, but it performs better than the standard camera, so it's kind of sandwiched somewhere in between. In 4K 60, the image quality, as it were, is 150 megabits per second, and at 4K 30, it's 100 megabits per second. It can record 4K 60, 4K 30, 2.7K 60, 2.7K 30, 1080 100, 1080 60, and 720 60. It's a single sensor with the MIPI heading to the DVR board, which records the 4K footage, and then it passes it through to the VTX for transmission. So you can record 1080 60, say, on your goggles from the transmission, while you're recording 4K 60 on the DVR board. While flying, latency-wise, it adds very little. I've noticed while I've been flying around with my whoops and things like that, with my goggles on 1080 standard bitrate, that the latency is kind of low to mid 30 milliseconds. While I'm flying around with my quad with the Moonlight camera recording at 4K, it's around 37. So I've kind of found that it's maybe 3 to 4 milliseconds of latency more on average, I would say. Latency wise, it's not something that I personally have had an issue with. Overall, then, what do I think of the camera? It does what it sets out to do. Is it a GoPro killer? No, of course it's not. But I don't think it's ever tried to be. It's an FPV camera that can record 4K footage. It's not an action camera doubling up as an FPV camera. As such, that's where its pros and its cons lie. When you're flying, you get a wider dynamic range from the Starlight sensor in the camera. When you're setting up your settings, that's what you see. You don't see the 4K footage. What that means then is when you're setting up your settings, you always just have to be mindful that your 4K footage is probably going to be a little bit darker, a little bit more contrasty, a little bit more action camera-esque, while what you're seeing in the goggles is your FPV feed. So when you're setting up your settings, it's just something that you need to be mindful of. But what that means then is at nighttime or in low light, when you're flying around, or when you're setting up your settings for those situations, you can fly around quite easily. Let's say it's not as good as the Pro camera, but it's more than adequate for flying around under street lights, and even in really low light, you can still see plenty. And you can adjust the settings as such that your 4K footage will somewhat reflect what you can see in the FPV feed. So overall, I think it's pretty good camera. It does what it sets out to do. I've always maintained that a standalone HD camera is the better option, and in most cases, I still believe that to be the case. The likes of a Runcam Thumb or something that a lightweight 4K camera that you can transfer from craft to craft saves you a load of money, and it means you only need one of these things. But I can see the merits of having an all-in-one, a camera that's trying to be as universal fit as possible. I can see the merits in it. It's not going to suit every single situation. There's still plenty of my quads or my planes that I'm not going to be running out and putting Moonlight cameras in and replacing my HD cameras on. But there are some that I think it's probably going to be the way forward. So in the goggles, the way it kind of works is you have your camera settings in the menu, and you have your recording settings. And normally those recording settings is where you set up whether you want to record 1080 or 720, that kind of thing. When you have the 4K camera connected in, a 4K option appears within there. On the latest firmware, there's an option for saturation and for sharpness. Now, what I generally find is the Caddx cameras are over sharpened. So the first thing that I do is drop the sharpness from the 5 default down to 3. And I've left the saturation on 5. That's within the recording tab, and that's the settings for the 4K footage. So in there, I would set, for example, 4K 60, saturation 5, sharpness 3. Then I move to the camera tab, which is a bit of a mix of your FPV settings and settings that do reflect the 4K footage. So in there, you have the likes of your 3D and 2D noise reduction options. Now, what I found is that 3D I've set to mid and 2D I've set to low. Caddx will hopefully release a document that explains what they are. If they don't, I'll put it in the description or something like that. Also, then in there, you have your auto settings for the exposure of the camera itself. And generally, I find the auto settings work really well. If you just want to fly around and just record some high quality 4K footage to upload onto YouTube or something like that, then the auto settings are going to be fantastic. They're just going to, do the job. Plug in, set it to auto, go and fly and enjoy yourself. If you find that the exposure is a little bright, just use the EV setting, which is what we've all kind of been used to doing with Walksnail. Just drop it down to 0.5 or even -1, and it just darkens the overall image down, and then you can just go and fly. If you want to adjust the settings a little bit more, you can do. You can change the shutter and the ISO from auto and manually set them. You can set the ISO to manual, so it'll stick to, say, 100 ISO, or you can set it to max. So if you were to set it to 800, it'll float between 100 and 800. So there's a bit of manual tweaking available there. It's not a full-blown action camera, so it doesn't have log or color profiles or anything like that at the minute. But I think that's something that Caddx will eventually add in to the menus, or possibly even to the Wi-Fi app. So overall, what do I think of it? For the price point that I believe it'll be released at, I think it's a really good piece of kit. It's not going to suit everybody. It's not a professional camera, but it's 90% there. There's enough manual settings to get really good footage from. The auto settings work really well. So regardless of whether you dabble in tweaking things in DaVinci Resolve or Premiere, or you just want to plug it in and go, it really suits everybody. The size isn't going to be fantastic for 75mm whoop. That's probably more down to the camera than anything. Hopefully they bring out a smaller nano size 4K camera. It's something I imagine Caddx will eventually do. But the overall size, the weight, about 40 grams for the whole kit. The footage that I'm going to link in my playlist is footage that I've just gathered over the two weeks and 25 to 30 packs that I've been flying. Some of it are on the optimal settings. Some of the footage is not on the optimal settings. It's stuff that I've just uploaded as I've been going. It's a representative sample of how my testing had been going. You can see there's stabilization test there, which works really well. You just drop the video file into the latest version of Gyroflow, and it steadies it, and that's it. There is onboard EIS in 2.7K mode, which at the minute isn't great. It's very, very clunky. I probably wouldn't use it. I think they need to tone it down a bit, but hopefully that's something that can be fixed in firmware. Speaking of which, since I've had the camera, there's been 3 firmware drops. So it's something that they are actively developing and trying to add to. So yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty good piece of kit, worth the money. I would say so. Yeah, that's it. Enjoy.